Is that a normal thing? Do siblings normally do that?
Wait a minute. She invited friends to come over and touch you?
Yeah, like, if they want to pick up the baby or like play with the baby, you got to wash your hands first.
I'd wash my hands before I touched you, Gene.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Appreciate that. You should wash your hands after you touch me.
Gross.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Shat The Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we love and growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you even remember what Blockbuster Video was? If you answered yes, and this is the podcast for you, I'm one of your three co-hosts, Roger Roper. And alongside me are my two co-hosts, Big D, Dick Eberts.
Good evening.
And Gene Phone Home Lyons.
Be good.
And each week we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. Each week the audience selects from 6 movie choices that we then break out our race car VHS tape rewinder and watch the movie that tallied the highest number of votes. At the end of the podcast, the three of us will provide you, the audience, with a number of wipes. Each movie we take to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. It's how we help the podcast grow. You can also check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review television series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, and next week, Watchmen.
Next week.
At the time that we're recording this, isn't it next week? Isn't it the 22nd? Oh, that's October.
Yeah.
October 22nd. All right.
Well, it's good you guys excited.
A few more weeks. It's going to be in a few more weeks. Anyway, I'm excited. That being said, Big D, what movie are we reviewing in this episode?
Well, this was a category that I had put up quite a while ago when we did all of the host favorites. And I don't know, Gene, did we ever do the favorites of Gene Lyons? Did we create a category?
Just Working with You Guys is my favorite movie.
Oh, that's very sweet. But the category was Dick Eberts' favorite movies. And these were all my favorite movies growing up. But we did it so long ago that actually you'll see most of the list we've done by now. So of the 6 movies that were up for vote, 3 of them we'd already done, The Karate Kid, Demolition Man, and The Rock. And of the movies that were left, in last place was Flash Gordon, then Stargate, and the winner was the 1982 E.T. the Extra Terrestrial.
Do you think our fans love Big D the most because they were the ones who commissioned the most of the movies that he had in his best of category?
No, it's just because I actually have good movies. That's why.
E.T. the Extraterrestrial is a 1982 American science fiction film produced and directed by Steven Spielberg and written by Melissa Matheson. It features special effects by Carlo Rambaldi and Dennis Murin and stars Henry Thomas and Drew Barrymore. It tells the story of Elliot, played by Henry Thomas, a boy who befriends an extraterrestrial dubbed E.T., who is stranded on Earth. Elliot and his siblings help E.T. return to his home planet while attempting to keep him hidden from the government. The concept was based on an imaginary friend Spielberg created after his parents' divorce in 1960. And in 1980, Spielberg met Matheson and developed a new story from the stalled sci-fi horror film project Night Skies. It was filmed from September to December 1981 on a budget of only $10.5 million. And unlike most films, it was shot in a rough chronological order to facilitate convincing emotional performances from the young cast. Released on June 11th, 1982 by Universal Pictures, E.T. was an immediate blockbuster, surpassing Star Wars to become, at the time, highest grossing film of all time, a record it held for 11 years until Spielberg beat his own record, Jurassic Park, which he surpassed in 1993, considered one of the finest movies of its generation. It ranks as the greatest science fiction film ever made in a Rotten Tomatoes survey. And in 1994, it was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. It was re-released in 1985 and then again in 2002 to celebrate its 20th anniversary with altered shots and additional scenes. Before we dive into the review and spoil the movie for you, we asked the question, where were you? What are your memories of this movie? We'll start with you, Big D, as the elder statesman in this podcast. What are your memories of E.T. the Extraterrestrial?
So there's a couple moments as a kid that you remember with the movies. First one was I saw Star Wars in the back of my parents' station wagon in a drive-in. That was number one. This is number two. I can remember sitting in the movie theater with my parents. It was Mamaroneck Playhouse 4. At the time, I think I was just short of being 9 years old. And this is the first big summer blockbuster that I remember. Parents were excited. Kids were excited. It was such a big cultural moment and kind of overtook everything that our summer camp, on one day that it was rainy, they never did movie days. They just packed us all up, took us to the movie theater, and we watched it as an entire camp. That's how big this movie was, and I can remember what it felt like to sit in that theater that day. It was a big moment as a kid.
Gene, you and I are roughly the same age. Did you see this movie in theaters?
I did not see it in theaters, but I don't remember a time without E.T. I fell in love with it at a very young age. I'm pretty sure I saw it at home on VHS, and I was obsessed with the character design, the vibrant colors, and most importantly, the way the kids were a lot like me. This was really, I think, the point in my memory where I started forming memories. This is about as far back as my memory goes. And I just remember that it was amazing to me to see kids like me, very believable kids on screen. And I liked that it was different from a lot of the other movies that my family was watching at the time. There wasn't a ton of violence or sexuality, but it wasn't a childish movie. It wasn't a kid's movie, like a Disney movie. It felt different than that. And it also, this was at the time when I was starting to have feelings more complex than happy, sad, feelings like nostalgia or longing or fear. And this movie dealt with a lot of the feelings I was just beginning to discover without being too grown up and inaccessible. So it hit at exactly the right time. And I think that's why watching it now, I just connected to it immediately, unlike I have with any other movie.
Well, have either of you watched this movie recently?
No, sadly, I think I probably haven't watched it in probably 10 years. It's been a while.
Yeah, I'd say it's been about a decade for me too.
Yeah. I, like you, remember watching this as a child, but I was trying to remember of whether or not I had actually seen it in theaters. And I actually didn't even know that they had re-released it in theaters until I just read that. So I may have watched this movie in the theaters when it was re-released, because that was around the time, like you, Gene, I remember it as being a big part of our childhoods, but I also remember it being on HBO a lot. And I can't remember if I watched it there or not, or if it was just in pieces and segments. Because I know as an adult, I haven't watched this movie in its entirety since, I don't know, I started liking girls. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? I remember riding the ride at Universal Studios, and I remember Reese's Pieces, but I don't remember actually watching the entire film from start to finish.
You hadn't watched this movie in 2 months?
Right, exactly. Exactly.
God, well, I'm old enough to actually remember getting the Atari magazine. There used to be an Atari monthly magazine that came out that showed you the games, and being so excited for the video game to come out. And then I got the first kick in the teeth of being an adult and learning about disappointment was when that E.T. game came out.
It's the game that brought down Atari. It broke an entire corporation.
It also broke my heart.
Well, that being said, Big D, play the trailer.
In this quiet neighborhood, on this tranquil street, a mystery is unfolding. And an adventure is beginning. Again.
I'm keeping him.
In March 2002, Steven Spielberg's masterpiece returns to theaters everywhere.
What's he doing? E.T. phone home. E.T. phone home.
Like you've never experienced it before. With enhanced visual effects. Never before seen footage. And a digitally remastered soundtrack. Next spring, take the journey.
What are you waiting for? Let's go!
And experience the excitement as E.T. returns home to the big screen for a new generation to discover what the rest of us will never forget. Steven Spielberg presents the 20th anniversary of E.T. the Extra Terrestrial.
I'll be right here.
A small group of alien botanists secretly visit Earth to gather plant specimens, but when government agents appear, the aliens flee in their spaceship. However, one of them is left behind soon after. A boy named Elliot discovers the abandoned alien hiding in their tool shed, and despite his family's disbelief, Elliot leaves Reese's Pieces candy to lure it into its house. Before going to sleep, Elliot realizes the alien is imitating his movements. He feigns illness the next morning to stay home from school and play with it. Later that day, Michael and their 5-year-old sister Gertie meet the alien, and they decide to keep it hidden from their mother Mary.
So I sat down to watch this movie, and I had a lot of concerns about the fact that anytime we have sci-fi from the early 80s, it's like, oh God, is it going to look real anymore? Is it going to look cheesy? And E.T. does an exceptional job with the visuals and, more importantly, the sound. The sound in this movie is fantastic. And so the first thing we see is these, as the aliens are very peacefully gathering plants and stuff, is these government agents show up. And without a word, without any sort of facial expressions, without any sort of character building, I'm immediately afraid of them. And likewise with the aliens, just by the sound and the way they're moving, I'm in love with them already. Like I care about them. This is like all in the first few seconds. This opening scene has almost zero dialogue and plays out as almost a silent film, but it's not like too artsy.
Yeah, that was one thing that I noticed right away too and actually it's not just the scene, it's throughout the entire movie. John Williams' score is really what makes this movie. There's very little dialogue between the alien and even the boy and the scientist later on in the movie, and the boy and his, like, that's really the only dialogue is between the kids and their family. The rest of it is just emoting and visual storytelling by Spielberg, as well as the orchestral score by John Williams.
And I didn't remember the score being so present. Mm-hmm. There's music played through a majority of the movie. And in doing some research, I was surprised to learn that Spielberg was having a little difficulty getting the cut right. So he finally went to Williams and said, hey, give me the score. I will cut the movie to the score. So that's why the score works. It hits every cut with that emotional beat. And the two together, like you said, Gene, just sitting there listening, you can't help but get drawn in.
Beyond the score, like there's so much attention to detail in the sound that there's these like soft, endearing purrs and tones coming from the aliens. And then what was crazy to me is things that I see every day that I never think of as threatening. I was already in their mindset where things like headlights, flashlights, jingling keys, mobs of people. I was afraid of these guys, and you can hear every little thing. It's so enjoyable.
I think a big part of that is how Spielberg used light. What he chose to highlight. There's the scene after of course, the whole time where the aliens are moving around, you don't get to see them. They're in the shadows. It builds the suspense. But then when Elliot comes out to the shed, for example, it is the backyard. It's moonlit. There's a light coming out of the shed. When Elliot falls asleep and he's been waiting for E.T. to come out, and the light, it's like a thing he does in Indiana Jones. Spielberg loves to do it. He just puts the light on the character's face, on the eyes, so everything is dark. You can be there with them. He builds the suspense without showing us virtually anything.
Yeah. But I didn't really remember that they were botanists or that were collecting plants. So are you telling me that they're all just hippie farmers? Like, what is it that they're trying to do? Is this the first time that they visited us, or do they continually come back and steal plants? What is their purpose? Why are they here?
Oh, no, man. It's like the Predator, except instead of collecting the bodies of people at war, they just go around and have a trophy room full of, geraniums and chrysanthemums.
But there is a problem I have with their anatomy. You figure they're advanced. They've developed over the centuries. Usually animals have, let's say, for example, it's gazelles out in the plains. When they see a lion, their tail goes up. They have a reaction. When any of the aliens get scared, their entire chest lights up. Instead of being something that should help defend you from an enemy, it's more like, hey, I'm here. Come find me, come eat me. It's a very bad evolutionary design.
Yeah, you would think that, like, if they get spooked or startled, kind of like a giraffe, like their necks would go up and they would like look around like a periscope to sense danger. But that doesn't happen. They like shrink down. And then how is E.T. running so fast? Like he's running away from these trucks, these Broncos, these cars. His legs are like 3 centimeters apart. Like his gait is very short. How is he running at such an incredible pace?
Yeah, and you can totally tell in the movie that E.T. is on wheels because he's going through like brush, but he's not moving up and down at all. So my only way I love to rationalize things that I love. Here's what I'm thinking. We know that he's got telepathic ability. Maybe he's just flying himself
like
over
Yoda?
the ground at a very low altitude.
Like a land speeder in Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, it looked like Sesame Street where Grover's running down the street. It's just a smooth track. But as scary as this is, I can imagine going back when I was a kid, this must have been almost too much to handle. It's dark. You don't know who these government agents are. You don't know what these aliens even look like. But in Spielberg's first script, it was even much darker. E.T.'s not this benevolent friend of Elliot. The aliens actually antagonize the families. They start to go after the kids. There's actually a part where Elliot possibly gets kidnapped. There was actually even like a backstory of the aliens at war, and E.T.'s name was Zrek. It would have been a very different movie. It was actually going to be called Nocturnal Fears. And this sounds like an adult, like Skinamax movie, not the epic 80s movie that, was at one point the top in box office history.
Yeah, I think Spielberg took the same concepts from that original idea and made Poltergeist, right?
Yeah, which he filmed almost simultaneously with E.T.
Yeah, it's crazy because they almost like use the same house. Like the Poltergeist house and the E.T. house, if it's not the same, they're virtually identical. And I think that's kind of what he was going for.
To me, somebody from the East Coast, California, all these houses, all these cul-de-sacs, all these neighborhoods, they could be one and the same. I don't know. Did they film it in the same neighborhood or just did all of them look like that?
So if you've ever watched that Spielberg documentary on HBO, Spielberg uses suburbia that he lived in. So Spielberg actually grew up in Phoenix, Arizona. Did you know that?
I did know that. I think we talked about that during Poltergeist.
We talked about that. Poltergeist. Yeah. So a lot of his surroundings as a child when he made Poltergeist and when he made E.T., his experiences were suburbia. And at the time, that's what it looked like, right? So a lot of his stories and settings are set in suburbia, which is something that he fondly looks upon as defining who he became later on in life. So yeah, that's why he sets a lot of his movies there.
Yeah, and that might be why I connected so well to this movie. There were so many familiar touchstones. One of them was that growing up in that sunny suburbia. I actually would have killed to live where these kids live, with a nice forest nearby and a nice present mist. It looked like a really nice place to be. Cornfield, oddly, just there in California. But the other thing I really connected with well is the children and the way that Michael and Elliot and Gertie all get along. A lot of times in movies when we watch them, movies like Weird Science and pretty much any 80s movie, there's got to be one brother who's like a dick and he's going to like harass, E.T. and you've got the other kids that are like bullies. And I really love that Elliot and Michael and Gertie all took care of each other, and even E.T. And like even the bullies in this movie are like pretty chill by 80s movie standards.
Yeah, well, unlike you, Gene and Big D, I wasn't raised with a sibling in the same house. Like my sister was adopted when I was 18 and I was already in college. So I have no recollection or I have no understanding of what it's like to live in the same household. But I imagine, like, if you have a good relationship with your sibling, you're going to do things like razz them a little bit. Like, hey, go get the pizza and then you can join our Dungeons and Dragons game. But like, was your sibling rivalry supportive, or were you more like the Weird Science burping in your younger brother's face or sister's face?
I don't know. Like my sister would like hold me down and yank on my toes till they popped and stuff like that to be funny. But she would always make sure that I had something to eat. and, would stick up for me. When I was a baby, this is a weird one. My sister made her friends wash their hands before they were allowed to touch me. Is that a normal thing? Do siblings normally do that?
Wait a minute. She invited friends to come over and touch you?
Yeah. Like, if they want to pick up the baby or like play with the baby, you got to wash your hands first.
I think when people have a newborn, they're a little overprotective. I'd wash my hands before I touched you, Gene.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Appreciate that. You should wash your hands after you touch me.
Gross.
But yeah, what I like about that family dynamic is most families, like you said, Roger, you'll fuck with each other. But the second shit goes down, they immediately come online. They protect each other. They've got each other's backs. I just didn't remember the whole divorce part where the poor mother is dealing with it and then the father being off in Mexico. So the absent father adds that extra dynamic. But you really buy into that family and it becomes that you're emotionally invested.
Did you buy into the advertisements for Reese's Pieces?
Oh my God, no. You talk about that. I remember as a kid because I'm allergic to peanuts. So I couldn't enjoy Reese's Pieces. And it's Reese's Pieces, Roger. You've been Reese's Pieces.
What am I saying?
I like the way Raj says it. Reese's
You guys
Pieces.
don't say Reese's Pieces?
No, Reese's Pieces.
It's Reese's Pieces.
It's Reese's Pieces.
No, it wasn't. Maybe that's what your parents told you it was.
That's how you say it.
No.
Reese's Pieces. It's a fun way to say Reese's Pieces. I get it.
Okay,
I know
Roger.
I know it's Reese's Pieces.
This is so
cute. I like to say Reese's Pieces.
But this has to be the most famous product placement in history, right? Is there any product you remember more?
I think
Pepsi and Back to the Future, maybe?
No. God, what's the one that everyone went out and bought right after they watched the movie?
Cocaine from Scarface?
Yeah, that's it. That's the one.
No, but Spielberg, they actually first went to Mars, and Mars owns M&M's and said, we have a script here. It's going to be Spielberg. There's going to be a kid-friendly movie with an alien, and there's going to be a part where they spread out candy. It's going to be integral to the part. Would you like to be part of it? And Mars was like, could we see the script? And Universal was like, no, there's no way anybody is seeing this script. So Mars was like, that's okay, we'll pass. And this has to be one of the biggest mistakes in history. Because Spielberg then went to Hershey and said, could we do Hershey Kisses? And they're like, well, we have a new candy coming out called Reese's Pieces. Why don't you do that instead? So they paid $1 million for the right to use it in E.T. In the next year, Hershey's profits went up 65% based on the tie-in to E.T. alone. So this was a big part, and this made the candy brand huge, and it made Reese's Pieces one of the popular candies of the early 80s.
When the children ask the alien about its origin, it levitates several balls to represent its planetary system and then demonstrates further its powers by reviving dead chrysanthemums. The alien signature power is using its glowing fingertip to heal a minor flesh wound, saying the word ouch. The next day, Elliot begins experiencing a telepathic connection with the alien, including exhibiting signs of intoxication because when E.T. is at home, it's drinking cans of Coors beer and watching reruns of Tom and Jerry. He then begins freeing all the frogs in his biology class.
So I know in this podcast, inevitably, we talk about nostalgia a lot. And there have been times when I felt light touches of it here and there. Oh, I remember this thing. Oh, I remember not having cell phones. Oh, I remember young Arnold Schwarzenegger. Nothing we've watched has made me wish for my childhood the way E.T. did. The way that dinner looked, like the place settings, what dinner actually looked like, the way the TV looked, my toys, my clothes, my friends, like calling into the radio station to make a request, paying the pizza man in cash, not ordering it online and putting it on your card. And I just realized that I love the fact that I grew up in the 80s. It was a beautiful time to be a kid, and it brought all of it back to me.
If we're not careful, this fetishizing of the 1980s is going to be like our parents fetishizing the 1950s. Like that Leave It to Beaver, everyone comes home in a suit and tie, and we're going to make America great again. Like, is the 80s our generation's 50s?
Well, I think the difference here, though, is that I don't like the Stranger Things version of the 80s, right? It was like, weren't the 80s cool? Everything was cool. It's like it's the very little things, the subtle things, things were kind of tacky. House layouts didn't make sense. Dinner was always like really dimly lit. Like it's like there were just these touchstones that I really loved. And the scene where Elliot goes out and gets the pizza, I just remember that shit. I remember like the pizza man didn't give a fuck about bringing it to your door. You had to go out to the car and give him cash. A child goes out to a man's car and gives him money and just gets the pizza. And you didn't get like 5 pizzas. You got a pizza. That was it. The family eats one pizza. It was fucking great.
Yeah, we were all much skinnier back there in the 80s. But this movie, it was meant for kids and it was about kids. So what I like the way they shot all of the scenes. If you don't pay attention, you don't notice none of the adults until the very end when we meet Keys, all the adults are shot from the shoulder down. It's from a kid's perspective. It's shot from down low. It's how kids see the world. I think it really connected kids to the movie because that's how kids were used to. Adults were almost faceless, except for your mother. You see their mother. You don't even see the teacher until the very end. So I like that helped build the suspense, but it also made you remember what it was like to be a kid, where adult things were almost beyond your comprehension.
Yeah, it's why Tom and Jerry is always shot from the angle of Tom and Jerry, so they only see the bottom half of the human's legs, because that's what their experience is as well. But like, how old are these kids? How old is Elliot when he's going to biology class? Do they even do dissection of animals anymore? Like Big D, like you're the only one with a daughter, so I can only direct this question directly to you. At what age, if Emma was, let's say Elliot is in the 3rd grade, right? 2nd grade, maybe?
He's 10 years old.
Oh, he's 10 years old. So what is that? I have no recollection of Big D. 10 years old. What age is that?
If you graduated 18 and then you're in 12th grade, so let's subtract 10 from
So you're in 4th grade. You're in 4th
maybe
grade.
2nd grade.
2nd, 4th grade? Okay. So
maybe.
I can't do 2nd grade math. So
Here's another way to look at it. You normally are in 1st grade at 6, 2nd grade at 7, 3rd grade at 8.
Yeah, 4th grade. Yeah. All right. Like, is that old enough at 10 years old? Would you allow Emma to dissect an animal, even if it was dead? Or no, a live animal. First you have to kill the animal, then you're going to dissect it.
Well, I don't think I have a big concern of that for a while since she's in pre-K. So I don't think the kindergarten is going to traumatize these kids. But even as someone who grew up in the 80s, I don't ever remember dissecting a live animal. I remember we had them. They were almost like frozen. They were already dead. They didn't make us kill them. I think that's kind of fucked up if you have to kill what you're dissecting.
No, what's fucked up is they weren't even killing it. They were giving it chloroform. So it was going to be alive.
Right.
Well, it's a vivisection. It's not even a dissection. That's fucked, man.
What's the benefit to this? You're trying to teach kids anatomy? You can't do that in a book. You have to have them. There won't be much blood, but there will be some body fluids.
No, I mean, I've done fetal pigs and cats and in class. And it was very instructive. I mean, actually seeing the way that stuff is laid out, it's pretty exciting.
I remember dissecting the cat but that was high school. And they came...
Cat?
Yeah, we dissected a cat.
Yeah,
but it was
it was
really?
It was already... It was like shaven, and it was like meant for exploration. Like, we didn't pet the cat ahead of time and then put a chloroform rag over it and then dissect it. Like, we didn't do any of that. They came, pre-vivisected. Yeah, I guess is the word.
How the fuck are they doing household pets? Were they doing puppies too in your school?
No, that'd be crazy. This is why I don't like cats.
God.
You know why? Because I had to dissect a cat in high school.
Yeah, it might be.
And in the 80s, we were raising just an entire generation of serial killers.
Well, that's how they all start. But this scene you're talking about here in the classroom where they're dissecting the frogs, it is a master class in efficient storytelling. So Elliot's in school. He's dissecting the frog. E.T. is home. Like you said, he's watching TV. He's drinking beer. He's throwing food on the floor, which he's a higher level. He's a smart animal. You would figure he'd know not to just throw shit on the floor. Put it away. I don't know why he's dropping stuff like the potato salad. But this scene then goes back and forth for about 10 minutes. And within those cuts, they're able to teach us that there is this psychic connection between the two. E.T. starts constructing that communicator. And it also is a lot of fun to see what's going on at school. And you weave that together seamlessly so that the plot moves forward without wasting any time. This movie is 2 hours long. And I felt like it was an hour long. There is not a wasted minute of screen time.
Like, that is what Spielberg does. He does this very effectively. Now, one can say, like, is this really a kid's movie? Like, you're watching, like, E.T. just house some Coors, like an entire 12-pack?
A bigger fucking concern is the mother comes home.
Yeah.
They're getting divorced. Dad's out of the house. Who does she think is pounding this 6-pack? She doesn't even look concerned, like, oh, that motherfucker Michael, where is he? Get him down here. That could have been Gertie chugging those beers.
Yeah, but that scene was fucking classic where E.T. just keeps going
awesome.
right out of sight. Big D, you talked about the efficiency of the film. I remember understanding by the end of the film, the last time I watched it, that there was a link between Elliot and E.T. I didn't realize until this viewing how early they introduced that idea of the telepathic link. It's basically present the first time they meet, and then it just grows more evident over time. And I was like, there's got to be a symbolism there beyond just a science fiction trope. And some analysts who watched this movie, they suggested that the link is more than just physical and psychological, that they're completing each other, right? That E.T. needs Elliot's understanding of Earth to find food and survive and find raw materials to build his communicator. Like, he needs Elliot for that. And so that's why he bonds with Elliot. And likewise, Elliot needs E.T.'s supernatural nature to fill in the gaps in his life. Like he says, like, I have all the power here, right? You know, and it makes him feel important. And he has a companion. Like when you see in the scene where Elliot puts his arm around E.T., that this is a kid that kind of feels left out of things and he's completed by him. So it's not just that they have a psychological bond, but they actually are linked by their need for each other.
Yeah, but is this because E.T. gives Elliot a Cosby? Like at one point early on, I guess right after the psychological link or that telepathic link between the two of them, E.T. like puts Elliot to sleep. What power do you think an alien is imbued with in order to be able to do this? Like, what is the outcome that's expected once E.T. puts a human to sleep?
No, I think this is that Elliot is so sleepy, it affects E.T. Elliot starts to fall asleep. E.T. does that thing. Then you see E.T. closing his eyes. I don't think E.T. put him to sleep. I think it was more they started sharing that connective bond. And Gene, you're right. I didn't fucking even notice it in the beginning where Elliot is, I think he's downstairs and E.T. opens the umbrella and it startles him. Elliot actually jumps before E.T. is startled. So I was in my notes. I was like, wait, do they have a connection? I didn't even remember the whole connection at all, but it's so early on. At what point do you think E.T. chose Elliot?
Yeah.
You think it was when he left him the candy?
I think it's when Elliot goes to sleep and then E.T. does a little something with his finger and he marks him.
I think you've lost all SJW credit for the rest of the season, Raj.
Marks him.
Does a Cosby? Does he do a Cosby? Does he give him a Cosby? Good God.
Well, as a biological creature, if E.T. eats, he must also poop and pee. He's walking around naked. Does E.T. go to the bathroom?
I would imagine as a creature who's conditioned to interstellar travel, they probably maybe shit like once a year. Maybe they're like Romulans where they basically only have to like, copulate once every 7 years. Maybe they only shit like once a decade or something like that.
Forget about where he shits. I found myself thinking here because I already knew the ending. Spoiler alert, E.T. gets a little bit sick. I'm like, do you think E.T. gets sick because Elliot keeps pumping him full of fucking candy and potato salad and snacks? That's why E.T. got sick? Like if you had just stuck giving him water and some basic nutrition, some fruit and vegetables, E.T. would have survived for years?
I don't know, because think about like, what kind of diseases would they be bringing with them that would infect us? I mean, history has shown that invading species kills off native bacterias, native animals, native humans. I mean, we did this with the Native Americans here when the Europeans settled our country, and the same with in South America. So if a fucking alien comes down, they're going to fucking give us some sort of alien AIDS.
Oh.
You don't think so?
No.
So you think what's more likely to happen is not what history has proven, but that an alien species is going to come down and be Jesus? Like he's going to heal. He's going to levitate things with his mind. He's going to point to the sky and say, that's where my dad is.
At what point in the Bible does Jesus start levitating stuff? I missed that part.
He walks on fucking water.
He didn't spin balls around in the air. He didn't make a kid on a bicycle fly. Was that a different part?
He performed miracles. He turned water into wine.
He invented the bicycle.
That's right. He fucking rose 3 days later, just like E.T. does.
Yeah, E.T. spins a couple balls. You just moved to fucking Boulder, dude. Think about it.
Well, the alien learns to speak English by repeating what Gertie says as she watches Sesame Street, and at Elliot's urging, dubs itself E.T. E.T. reads a comic strip where Buck Rogers, stranded, calls for help by making a makeshift communication device and is inspired to try it himself. E.T. receives Elliot's help in building a device to phone home by using a speak and spell toy. Michael notices that E.T.'s health is declining and that Elliot is referring to himself as we. And on Halloween, Michael and Elliot dress E.T. as a ghost so they can sneak him out of the house. That night, Elliot and E.T. head through the forest where they make a successful call home.
At this point in the movie, I'm like, I love this movie. And then I'm like, man, I really love this movie. And then I'm like, oh God, Halloween. Awesome. I love Halloween. And I started realizing like, this is a spooky movie. When people think of spooky movies that fall outside of the horror genre, normally we immediately go to Tim Burton, right? But like Tim Burton's films are spooky and cartoonish. You think of like, Beetlejuice, Nightmare Before Christmas, all those are literally cartoonish. E.T.'s very, very different because it's spooky, but it's also very heartfelt and grounded and gorgeous. And I started thinking about all the ways that they bring this darkness in the movie without making it a horror trope. It's nighttime in the forest. That's very spooky. You got the cornfield that you mentioned, Raj, the backyard with the lighting that you mentioned, Big D. E.T. always like hiding behind things. Halloween. It's this rich, spooky palette. And I was in heaven. I was like, I can't get enough of this movie. I don't want it to end.
No wonder you like this movie so much. It reminds you of Edward Scissorhands.
There's a lot of Edward Scissorhands in here, but not as cartoonish, not as garish.
Yeah.
But I gotta tell you, Halloween in California, it looks fucking kick-ass. Every kid in the neighborhood is out for Halloween. All of them. They've packed the streets. They're all unaccompanied. There's no parents. And they're all look like custom-made costumes. They all looked good. They looked like they were going to an adult party. When I was a kid, my parents used to get us those. You remember those vinyl kits? They'd come in a box, and it was like a plastic mask with an elastic band, and it had that vinyl suit. They were hot as hell. And we couldn't go out unaccompanied because everybody was afraid of tainted candy and razors and apples. This place, I don't know if it's because California is rich, but everyone in this town is either into cosplay or just the parents really love Halloween.
I don't know about the costumes, Big D, because Elliot's brother has to convince his mom to go out as a dead terrorist.
No, he wanted to go out as a terrorist, and she said no.
No,
that was his backup. He looked like a homeless man.
No, Big D. Listen, I understand this is a little bit of your white privilege, but Homeboy, Michael, is wearing a drawn-in beard, right, to almost illustrate that he's Middle Eastern. He's wearing camo pants. He's got a soldier's hat on,
really?
like a terrorist would wear, and he's got a big Rambo knife through the head, and I think he's carrying some sort of shopping bag. And I was thinking to myself, where have I seen a shopping bag, and what, at what point in time in this? He's a Libyan terrorist that I think bombed a shopping plaza back in the day. I think that's what he's going for, and the Rambo knife through the head was supposed to be, indicative of the heroes that you would worship at that age. Come on, Mom, everyone's doing it.
I thought he looked like a hobo.
No. How many hobos do you know have a fucking Rambo knife through their head?
I don't know. Violence in the homeless community is rampant.
What is he, a train hobo?
Forget about him being a terrorist, okay? Did your parents let you go out alone?
If they did, they didn't let me go out in blackface like Elliot. What is he supposed to be? He's supposed to be a hunchback? How many black hunchbacks have you seen?
Zoom, 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 boom, 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 boom,
yeah.
boom, boom, boom.
Okay, clearly I'm the only one who grew up with this experience. I don't know what you guys were doing. Your childhood sucked, guys. My mom would do my makeup when I would go out for Halloween. We didn't have like money really for costumes, so it would just be like, "Oh, you're a devil, and we're gonna paint your face red," or like, "Oh, you're a ghost, or you're a monster. We're gonna paint your face green, or whatever." That was pretty normal. And then you guys didn't go trick or treating by yourselves. I fucking did.
Yeah, no, I totally went trick or treating with friends, and we always made homemade costumes. Like there was one year that I wore like a vinyl plastic Superman. It was the worst. I like made my own like undercover Raphael Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle costume. I made my own costume where like I had an alien coming out of my belly. Gene, you know how into costumes I am. Of course, I created my own costumes as a kid and used my own makeup.
Yeah, the only vinyl one I had, like what Big D described, was a Chips one. I wanted to be Erik Estrada from Chips, and they had that one. Perfect. It was fucking dope. I wish I still had it. I wear that on dates.
I actually think you could be Erik Estrada this year for Halloween.
I think I'm going to go as a dead terrorist.
Well, I think, Big D, the problem with parents allowing children to go out in the 80s and making them want to go out in the daylight is because this is a time where kids were constantly being abducted in unmarked vans. And it's because, as the movie illustrates here, no one says a thing, just sees a black unmarked van hanging out outside of a house. This is how kids got kidnapped. And of course, as a mother in the 80s, if your kid didn't come home, what did you do? There was no cell phone. There were no beepers. Your kid was just gone.
Yeah, these G-men, they're not inconspicuous. They're literally sitting like 10 feet from the house in a cul-de-sac. It's really easy to see a van hanging out in your cul-de-sac.
But how fucking great are they at surveillance? They're listening to the conversation that Elliot and Michael's having. At no point do they say alien, do they say spaceship. They're out in the garage sniffing their dad's shirt. And they're talking about how much they miss their dad. But somehow the G-Man is like, I suspect something's going on here. We better follow these kids.
Well, with all that surveillance equipment, why didn't they hear E.T.'s terrible voice?
Terrible voice. It was like the greatest voice in movie history. The voice behind E.T., this is the part of the movie where E.T. starts talking. And I'm like, yes, the be good. And, just walking around, E.T., E.T., E.T. The voice was a woman named Pat Welsh, and she chain smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day. Love this. This is 80s shit, man. And that's how E.T. got that signature raspy sound. So the sound effects creator, Ben Burt, was at a camera store and hears this woman speaking, likes what he hears, invites her to audition for the part. And she worked on the film for 9.5 hours, recorded all the audio, got $380.
Shut up.
And that's it. They got E.T.'s voice.
Up.
Yeah, but
there's no way that's true.
Yeah, but $380 in 1982, you could go to college for 4 years at a state university for $380.
Yeah, but you know what she spent it all on?
Cigarettes.
I was say camera. She was at a camera store.
Oh, that's right. Well, the next day, Elliot wakes up in the field only to find E.T. gone. Michael searches for and finds E.T. dying next to a culvert. Michael then takes E.T. home to Elliot, who is also dying. Mary becomes frightened when she discovers her son's illness and the dying alien just as government agents invade the house. Scientists set up a hospital at the house, questioning Michael, Mary, and Gertie while treating Elliot and E.T. Their mental connection disappears, and E.T. then appears to die while Elliot recovers.
Okay, guys, while watching this movie, about every 3 to 5 minutes, I got a lump in my throat, either out of happiness or fear or sadness. And by the time Michael finds E.T.'s body lying in the culvert, like I'm on the verge of tears. And I look at the screen and I can see the thing on the screen is just this like chalky white plastic figure just flipped on its side, lying motionless in the water. But I'm still reacting as if my own friend is like bleeding out on the ground in front of me. I'm so emotionally invested that they could have just used like a log and I'd be like, oh my God, E.T. I was really, I had tears in my eyes. It was embarrassing.
I even felt the tension coming up. When I knew that scene was coming, I'm like, oh no, E.T.'s going to be in the culvert. No. And when he's there and Michael's like, oh no, I'm like, get that fucking raccoon away from E.T. Get him away. Pick him up. It's a rubber fucking doll. I'm an adult man, but yet that made me want to cry.
You guys got emotional over a thing that resembled the hairless chupacabra from Puerto Rican lore. This is what you get emotionally invested in?
I disagree with you 100%. I think the design of E.T. is brilliant. It could have gone either way. It could have looked comical. Most of the time they'll do something that's furry or fuzzy or something with the giant eyes and the tiny body. This managed to evoke, it looked like it could have been a natural biological being. It's not designed perfectly. Some of its anatomy doesn't make sense. Yeah, it's got some cool light up parts, but it really, most of the time E.T. doesn't talk until the very end. So he has to emote through his face. And the fact that this rubber doll could do this, that you could feel his emotion, he could build that bond without dialogue. I think that Disney stole a lot of E.T. for WALL-E. The way the eyes turn and the way his face looks. They do a great job. And I mean, I don't think I'm the only one who felt connected. The alien could have easily looked stupid or cheesy. I think they did a great job with the design.
Actually, WALL-E stole from Johnny Five. So Johnny Five, must have stolen it from E.T. But at this point, honestly, I thought E.T., while an iconic design, yes, I thought it looked really fake. I thought it looked really bad. And I kind of longed a little bit for a little bit of CGI. Also, I didn't really understand their mental connection because I thought maybe E.T. was like an energy vampire where he was just sucking the life from Elliot, like he had chosen someone to steal his life force from.
So, Raj, as the resident goth on the podcast and Lost Boys expert, I need to point out that normally if a vampire is sucking the life out of you, it's getting stronger while you're getting weaker. E.T. is not getting stronger. He's getting weaker.
Well, he's getting weaker because he's an alien life form on a different planet, and he's only sustained by draining this young boy.
No, I kind of felt what you're saying, Raj. Like, I kept thinking, E.T. conserve your energy. Why are you reviving the fucking plants? Why are you fixing every finger? I thought he was using his juice, his limited energy, that if he hadn't been fixing everything, he would have stayed stronger longer.
Well, how do people from NASA know exactly what this alien can or cannot do?
I don't understand what NASA's even doing there. So that brings us to the point in the movie where they're raiding the house. And I'm like, this movie is flawless. This movie is perfect. This movie is amazing. And so you've got the family in the bathroom upstairs. Again, heartbreaking scene. Elliot's sick. E.T.'s sick. He's reaching out now to their mother and he needs her help. He's looking to her as sort of this figure that can save him. And she's afraid of him and they move away from him. And I'm like, oh God, this is heartbreaking. And then the government agents raid the family's home and they're wearing astronaut suits. They're wearing like the visors that are like gold for solar protection, this thick insulation made for like the cold vacuum of space. And I'm like, wait a minute, if there was an alien in your house, what the fuck is NASA even doing there? Why is there a guy coming through the window like a horror movie and waving his arms around? I'm like, this part of the movie was a horrible misstep.
Okay, let's just assume that whatever this is, the NSA, this is whatever government agency.
It just says the government of the United States.
They said, we need the strongest possible suit. They weren't going to do one of these hazmats because E.T. might have had claws. You have to have something that's a little more robust so E.T. doesn't just cut open one of the normal suits. But the reason they do this, the home has always been the location of safety for the family. Every time Elliot's out in the backyard, he sees E.T. get scared, he comes inside, the family's safe. You take the home, which has been safe, and flip it. Immediately, the house now, it's being overrun by these agents. They're covering everything in plastic. You flip the place where everyone feels safe to now it's this place that also instills fear. So I thought it was done for dramatic effect, but it scared the fuck out of me as a kid. When the one comes through the window, through the blinds, this was definitely a horror movie for kids at that point.
Oh, I definitely remember being scared of these guys as a child. But now I'm thinking to myself, there's a lot of inconsistencies because you have some dudes in astronaut suits. You have people outside. Some are wearing hazmat suits while they're building the tent. You have some that are dressed like SWAT team members. And then you have just some dudes just wearing suits like, not a care in the world. And then when they're doing medical procedures, on E.T. when he finally dies, they just rip off their masks and give it mouth-to-mouth CPR. Like, how do they know how to resuscitate this alien? And when he dies, now you're just okay taking off your mask? You just had your tongue in its mouth, doctor.
As a former journalist who worked at a newspaper in Lima, Ohio, I got to point out that often they would do these like disaster drills or like terrorism drills, and basically the idea was if the hospital needed to deal with tons and tons of people who were hurt in some sort of an explosion or a chemical incident or some sort of a biological contaminant, they would be able to inflate a hospital in the parking lot of the hospital to double their capacity and get people in there and treat them. And every time we covered one of these things, I'd be like, okay, so they got this like secure perimeter with these like inflatable tents, but why is that guy not wearing anything? And there's some other dude just wandering around. And like they wouldn't even supervise me. I'd just be walking around. And I understand it was a drill, but I can tell you that even in, 2010, the level of government coordination is not super good. You get this all the time.
But also, I wanted to see some of the cover story. The neighbors are all out there right on the front lawn, like, hey, what's going on? If I see my neighbor's house covered and everybody in hazmat suits, I'm fucking wondering what's happened. Do I need to worry? Was there a chemical? Was there a gas leak or something? But to go back to that scene where you have E.T. and Elliot, and they're working on both, trying to figure out what's medically wrong with them. And you can see that their two readouts, their EKGs, are completely in lockstep. E.T. senses that Elliot's not going to make it. So he breaks that symbiotic connection with Elliot and chooses to let him go. And at that point, E.T. deteriorates and Elliot recovers. So there might be some truth to what you're saying, Roger, that Elliot helped stabilize E.T.
That's right.
Because once you broke that bond, you notice how he immediately deteriorated and subsequently, died.
A grief-stricken Elliot is left alone with the motionless E.T. when he notices a dead chrysanthemum, the plant that E.T. had previously revived, coming back to life. E.T. then reanimates and reveals that his people are returning. Elliot and Michael then steal a van that E.T. has been loaded into, and a chase ensues, with Michael's friends joining them as they attempt to evade authorities by bicycles. Suddenly, facing a police roadblock, they escape as E.T. uses his telekinesis to lift them into the air and toward the forest like he had done before for Elliot.
So guys, we recently covered Kindergarten Cop, and we talked about how these shifts in tone that are super abrupt can really ruin a movie. So you've got like, hey, this kid's being abused by his dad, and also, oh, look, it's a naked chef in bed. Ha ha ha. Somehow, E.T. breaks this rule. So jumping too rapidly from comedy to drama or violence to romance, it messes with the audience. We can't adjust to it. It doesn't make sense. E.T., I'm like in tears about E.T. being dead. And then when he comes back to life, I'm not even calling like, oh, this is kind of bullshit. I just buy into it immediately. And then I get the hardest laugh of the whole movie. I'm dying. Is when E.T. is now back to life and he's become like a chatterbox. He's like, Elliot, phone him. And Elliot's like zipping the body bag over his mouth and it's just smothering his mouth. Elliot. It's some of the funniest shit I've ever seen. And this movie has several scenes like this, like when Gertie is screaming in the closet and E.T. just runs by with his hands up in the air, that are brief, to the point, quick humor. Or when Michael jumps up in the air duct and whacks his head up there, it just looks genuine. It's hilarious. And again, the movie can do so much in the area of drama, but also is equally talented at comedy.
Yeah, I can't believe E.T. doesn't die there or suffocate as a result of this, because again, I don't know what the rules are. Why is E.T. dying? Does his race rely on being close to each other, and by his race coming back, like that's going to bring him back to life? Or is it the fact that Elliot told E.T., I love you, and it's love that really powers these hippie aliens?
This isn't fucking Frozen. You don't need an act of true love. No, what it is they need to be in close proximity to each other. Because maybe like he, connected to Elliot, got some power from him. When the other ones come closer, it like charges his heart battery.
Yeah.
They can feed off of each other. So the healthy, younger, vampire. Vibrant ones, no, that they have a symbiotic relationship. They help each other and they work together. I think once the ship comes back, it's like a wireless charger.
So they're socialists. They're socialist aliens.
That doesn't even make any sense.
It's a collective. It's a group. The impact that you have has impact on the other person. Surely you must know this.
Okay, all right. Moving on to the movie. I need to get this point out because I'm shocked that nobody's said it yet. We're almost done with the podcast. And if you haven't figured it out by this point, this movie basically made Stranger Things a thing. Like Stranger Things is either an ET homage or ripoff. I haven't decided yet, but it is like shot for shot ripping off everything. The kids on their bikes, the Dungeons and Dragons, the mystical forest setting, the hiding of a supernatural being from the adults and the parents. There's a fucking kid who looks exactly like Toothless with like the hat and the headphones and all that stuff. It's pretty blatant. And I think this is why when people were losing their minds over Stranger Things season 1, I was like, guys, this is a fucking ET ripoff. Why doesn't anybody see it?
Well, not only that, but this movie was also responsible for a lot of ripoffs. There was Mac and Me, which is almost a shot-for-shot recreation that answers the question, what would happen if Elliot was in a wheelchair? Or Flight of the Navigator. What would happen if E.T. invited me on a ship? Or batteries not included? What if E.T. was an entire race of cute robot drones or explorers? What if kids from the E.T. built a rocket ship out of trash cans and went to go visit him? Or Alf, what if E.T. stuck around a little bit longer on Earth and drank more Coors? Like, those were all blatant ripoffs of the benevolent alien trope.
Well, I think they saw that there was a big cash cow out there. That kids and aliens made big money, so they tried to make any connection they had.
There's a movie that came out in 1986 called A Brother from Another Planet. Guess what target market they capitalized on?
Oh no!
Mm-hmm.
Shut up!
Mm-hmm.
Jesus,
look for it. A Brother from Another Planet.
Wow. But as a kid, man, having a bicycle meant freedom. You could go out, you can have an adventure. And when these kids bust out, when they call the cavalry, they get the kids of their neighborhood together. And the idea as a kid that you, your friends on a bicycle, you could outsmart the adults, you could do anything. I vividly remember them going down the hills and evading the cars. And it was a kid's dream to think that they could do that. And the movie looks great, and it's 1982, but it still holds up. But when that bike scene transitions and all the kids start to fly in the daylight, it does not look as good as nighttime. The one kid is like kind of on his side, and he's still pedaling. And why are they all fucking pedaling? You're in the air. E.T. is powering you. Do you think if you put your brakes on, it's going to stop? You stop pedaling.
I think because if I was pedaling and I went up in the air, I wouldn't be like, let me stop pedaling and find out what happens. I'd be like, fuck it, I'm still pedaling.
I think this is the reason why bicycles evoke that 1980s feeling. Is like, do kids even ride bicycles anymore? Big D, are you going to let Emma ride her bicycle around your neighborhood?
Oh, she's got a fucking kick-ass bike right now with the basket on it.
Yeah, but how far do you let her go?
She's 3.5 years old. She's not 10 years old. When she's older, she can ride her bike as long as she wears a helmet. Yes.
All right. But as a kid growing up, did your bike have a basket on the front? Like, did you want one of those shopping cart baskets on the front?
No, but I had a set of pegs in the back so my friend could get on.
Yeah, I was a super nerd. I had turn signals and the little megaphone, like the bullhorn and a basket. I had it all tricked out. Very Pee Wee Herman.
But like, why even? I mean, this is, again, unfortunately, this is where my mind goes now. Why, if you're the government, are you going to pull out your shotguns if you're not going to shoot some punk kids while they're stealing an alien? Come on. The whole raid on Area 51, which at the time of this recording is supposed to happen tomorrow, with a bunch of people that were going to invade Area 51 to steal some aliens and some alien technology, all by doing Naruto runs, has proved anything. It's that Uncle Sam will not hesitate to shoot its own citizens. They said so on Twitter. That's the world we live in now. It was a much simpler time in the 1980s.
No, but what I think is sad is when they re-released this was 2002 that they replaced the shotguns with walkie talkies.
Shut up.
Yes, because Spielberg said he was always uncomfortable with the idea that these government agents and the police had shotguns trying to get kids on a bicycle. So yeah, they changed them and put walkie talkies. So I think that's more a profound comment on where we are than anything.
Of course they did. Well, standing near the spaceship, E.T.'s heart glows as he prepares to return home. Mary, Gertie, and Keys, a friendly government agent, show up. E.T. says goodbye to Michael and Gertie as she presents him with a chrysanthemum that he had revived earlier. Before boarding the spaceship, he embraces Elliot and tells him, "I'll be right here." Before pointing his glowing finger to Elliot's forehead, he then picks up the chrysanthemum, boards the spaceship, and it takes off, leaving a rainbow in the sky as everyone watches it leave. End movie.
So before E.T. leaves, he asks Elliot, he says, come. And I remember as a kid thinking, fuck, I'm going 100%. I love my family, but I'm immediately leaving with E.T. I'm thinking at any point they can come back and drop me off. It took about a day for them from getting the message to come back. What's the downside? This is the once in a life opportunity for Elliot. He wasted it. Would you guys have gone with E.T. or would you have stayed with your family?
I mean, I'm thinking I would go, but on one hand, like it'd be an amazing adventure and E.T. is super cool and I want to hang out with my buddy. But also, like, I don't know any of the other guys on the ship, right? Like maybe E.T. is like the nice one and the rest of them are just awful. I mean, they left him behind. Like they must be pretty ruthless. So I don't know if I'm walking on a spaceship with a bunch of aliens I've never met before. Maybe if they like had a meet and greet with my mom and she said it was cool, then I'd go for it.
Like she signed like a permission slip or
yeah, permission slip. Speaking of ETs though, in the closing minutes, you know, a lot of times movies just slap everything together at the end. They're just rushing toward the end here. And this movie, even in the last minutes, is still shot for shot perfection. The way ET moves, the way he emotes, the way the characters look at each other, those hero shots of the main characters. Drew Barrymore, we haven't even talked about her. For her age, her acting performance is amazing, and her farewell is heartbreaking.
I can't believe that we haven't talked about the cast here. These kids, the three main kids, are dynamite. Without them in the performances, this movie would have been forgotten to 80s schlock. They are some of the three best performances we've seen from kids. I'm going to put a link in the notes to Henry Thomas, who plays Elliot. He comes in, it's his audition, the first time he's on tape. And Spielberg they're doing the scene where Agent Keyes comes in and says, you know, we have to take him. And he says, no, he's my friend. This actor, Henry Thomas, starts crying, emoting on his first audition to the point where Spielberg at the end says, okay, kid, you got it. He gave him the job after this first video audition. It's incredible. Drew Barrymore is 7 years old. She's emoting better than most adult actors. It's incredible what they got these kids to do. I don't know why. Why do kids today? Why can't they act like this? Why haven't we seen anything like this?
Well, it's interesting that the final product came out the way that it does, because if memory serves me correct, and again, I could be completely wrong here, but you talked about how Spielberg had to shoot it in chronological order. That's because the children didn't know the severity of what was happening, and he wanted them to really like be and live in the moment. And it almost crushed him. Like he almost had a nervous breakdown in shooting a movie this way. And he had a hard time getting across what he wanted the kids to do. So he took there were multiple takes of almost every scene that the kids were involved in, and it almost broke his budget. They almost had to shut down production. I think that's what I remember.
But even with all of that going on, he still nails the visual and the oral side of this. There's a great scene when E.T. is back aboard the ship and that gangplank is going up and you're seeing E.T. through that gangplank again. And it's an evocative of the first time we saw these aliens, right? It's kind of calling back to those moments. And it's just this farewell connection. And then, of course, you know, might be considered a bit melodramatic by today's standards, but the spaceship door almost closing like a camera shutter. And the last thing you see of E.T. is just that glowing heart. Spielberg wasn't afraid to do something this obvious and this artistic. And if you've built up this goodwill over 2 hours, it works. And if the movie hadn't hit on all cylinders, it would have been, you know, again, like Big D said, schlocky, but this worked out perfectly. I thought it was a perfect end of the movie, a very long farewell, you know, like I'm like, dude, they're coming for you. Maybe get out of there. But it really worked on an emotional level.
Well, now's the time of the podcast where we break out our Shat meter and give you our wipe scores. If you've never listened to the podcast before, 0 wipes is a perfect movie. 5 wipes is a terrible movie. We'll start with you, Gene. How many wipes do you give E.T.?
Well, guys, my immediate reaction to E.T. was that this is a masterpiece. And I was like, is that accurate? Let me look it up. And so I looked up the term masterpiece, and it originally meant a piece of work by a craftsman accepted as their qualification for membership of a guild as an acknowledged master. So basically, you want to be a master in a guild, you have to submit a masterpiece. And I think this is the movie that made Spielberg an acknowledged master in my eyes, personally. I finally appreciated what he's capable of as a director. Every shot to me was perfect. Every sound was beyond perfect. I've never heard a movie, maybe with the exception of some of the, maybe Terminator 2, that nailed the sound editing so well. The film moved me emotionally and constantly from start to finish. And the 2 hours weren't long enough. That's a big factor that we don't talk about a lot on the podcast. Is a lot of times we're like, fuck, I wish that movie would have ended sooner. I'm looking at you, Blade Runner. But when you watch a movie that's 2 hours long and you wish there was another hour of it, that's rare. And I really wanted more time with all these characters. E.T. is wholesome, it's thoughtful, and it's beautiful. And I think it's just as good in 2019 as it was in 1982, and maybe even better. I think that maybe some of the things that we've gone through as a society and as people, reconnecting to 82, I think it evokes an even more powerful emotional response to kind of the emotional and cultural zeitgeist at the time. And I do miss that time. So for me, it's not perfect. We did have that weird astronaut scene. It got a little hijinky during the escape with like all the bumbling government people. But again, it's a kid's fantasy. I get it. And so for me, it's half a wipe.
You know, I agree with the things that you said, Gene, but for me, I unfortunately think this movie really does show its age in some parts in a very nostalgic way, but in other parts in a kind of dated way. And this is where, you know, Spielberg has gotten better, and you can see where a lot of those nuances that are in his later movies are so much more expertly crafted. It's a little rough around the edges here, but you can see where he was going for. Like, I think he was limited by a smaller budget, and that probably led to why the special effects don't hold up, although it's better than what was the one we did with the space movie where he goes out and he joins the fleet after playing the video game?
Last Starfighter.
Yeah. I'm glad they didn't go all CGI here, because obviously it wouldn't have worked. But like, obviously they're doing the old school superimposing when they're doing the bicycles. So, you know, for that, I mean, it's a good movie. It's better than average. It's not my favorite Spielberg movie. I think Jaws is so much more evocative and so much more entertaining, and a longer in a similar part of time. And it's interesting because this movie overtook Jaws. But that being said, it's not 0.5 for me. It's a 2 wiper for me. And I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for that. But yeah, I mean, it's iconic, but I don't think it's the best movie we've ever watched or anything like that. So I think it's slightly better than average, and probably one of my least favorite Spielberg films. So that leaves you, Big D.
So I think I'm definitely not looking at this with nostalgia glasses. I went back on it. It'd been probably 10 years, like I said before I watched it. And it has to be a zero white movie. Okay. The performances, they're unbelievable when you go back and watch them. Everybody talks about the kid in The Sixth Sense. I think Elliot should have been up for a major award. The kids are believable. But what's more important to me is the story, and I think the relationships between the characters. Everything seems real. At no point does it feel like you're watching a movie. Yeah, it's about aliens. Okay, that's a stretch. But the family and the way that everybody interacts and reacts and what it was like to be a kid, Spielberg captures that perfectly. I think the storytelling is tight. It's 2 hours, but it felt like it was 35 minutes. They could have made this another 20 minutes longer, and I don't know if it would have been any better, but I didn't feel like it was long at all. At no point was I looking at my watch. I couldn't believe how fast the time went by. The John Williams score, all of his movies are amazing, and he just evokes an emotion. It works perfectly with a Spielberg visual. I think everything is tight. It's such a simple story of the parallels between losing a father and wanting a mentor, and E.T. being alone and scared, and how they find each other. And I think it's fantastic. I loved it. I almost wanted to show it to Emma today, but I'm like, oh, it's a bit young. I was like, you want to watch a movie about an alien, a spaceman? She's like, is he nice? I was like, oh yeah, he's very nice. I can't wait to sit down and watch this with her. I'd love to hear what people think who didn't grow up in the 80s, if they feel the same way. It's why you go to the movies. It's to be taken away from your daily grind, to forget about the things that are around you. At no point do they talk down to us, the audience, or talk down to the kids. It's a perfectly constructed story. I don't think it gets any better.
So how many wipes do you give it?
Zero. Zero, without doubt.
And I want to add to that, Big D, with some of the things that you said, just parts that I forgot to mention. Two really big things. One is that although I gave it half a wipe for some missteps that I thought were just not necessary or not perfectly executed, this movie made me feel a broader range of emotions, I think, than any movie I've watched, as far as from laughing to being sad to being scared. And in addition to that, another big part is that from a visual and sound perspective, I think it is the most beautiful thing I've seen as far as cinema goes. Every single scene was like perfect, beautiful. And that's huge, you know? So my half a wipe is not a knock on the construction of the film at all. It's just that one little thing. I want to make sure that I didn't get carried away by emotions on the wipe scale. And so, because we got to be serious about our Shat scores. So it's still half a wipe for me, but I agree with everything you said.
So if we were to add up all those scores and divide by 3, 0 wipes, 0.5, and 2, and then divide by 3 for the overall Shat score, what does that give us, Gene?
Raj, that gets us just under 1 wipe average for ET at 0.83 repeating wipes.
And Big D, if we were to compare that against all the movies we've done here at Shat the Movies and rank it alongside the other episodes in the Shat the Movies pantheon, where does that put E.T. the Extraterrestrial?
I'm not happy with where this falls, and I don't think a lot of people will. It is now tied in the 18th spot with Beetlejuice. It is better than The Empire Strikes Back and Terminator, Back to the Future 2. It is worse than Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Good Will Hunting, Groundhog's Day, and Die Hard. I feel like this is a better movie, and I hope you just honestly believe it was a 2 wipe and you're not just trying to be contrarian.
It is not as good as Die Hard. It is not nearly as good as Ferris Bueller's Day Off either.
But one point I want to bring up, Rod, you always talk about sequels.
Mm-hmm.
I went back and looked. Of the top 11 movies, box office wise, in the 80s, this is the only movie that has not been rebooted or part of a sequel or franchise. The only one. So we can be thankful they will never touch this and never make a sequel.
Hey, don't never say never, because they're trying to remake Princess Bride. So no movie is off Hollywood's grubby, greedy little fingers. They tried to remake Ghostbusters. So, and there was a sequel. So I don't know. Listen, it's not a bad movie. It's just not one of my favorite Spielberg movies. There's plenty of others that are better than this. Jurassic Park is better than this. You don't think Jurassic Park, the original Jurassic Park, is better than E.T.?
Nope.
You're crazy. This is 2001: A Space Odyssey for children.
I think it's just you're missing. Your heart is a bit too small for your body. So I think you're unable to make that connection. When you see a story that shows relationships and people who love each other, it's almost like you're watching a foreign film. You can't comprehend it. So I understand it.
Yeah, I have no feelings. Now it's part of the podcast where you give our shout outs. Gene, what's a shout out?
Raj, a shout out is our way of saying thank you for coming to shatthemovies.com, visiting our website where you can see what movies are upcoming, vote for movies that you'd like to see, and interact with us. Part of that interaction is using the shout out box. It slides right out for you, and you can put your name in there and you'll hear your name on the podcast. This week's shout outs go out to Phil. I watched The Rock twice the day it came out. Hattie, Jeff L. from Chicago, Prophoria, David R., who loves Ryan S., Nolanzabra 3, and Kath from Melbourne, Australia.
Thank you so much for going to the website and giving our shout outs. Again, you can go to the shatthemovies.com to hear your name on the podcast. Big D, what movie are we doing next?
So we're going from a movie I loved as a kid to a movie that terrified me as a kid. This one was commissioned by John Claiborne, and it's as Admiral James T. Kirk, played by William Shatner, and Captain Spock, played by Leonard Nimoy, monitor trainees at the Starfleet Academy. Another vessel from the United Federation of Planets is about to try out a planet-creating Genesis device in a seemingly deserted portion of space. In the process, 2 of Kirk's officers are captured by Khan, played by Ricardo Montalban, an enemy Kirk thought he'd never see again. Once more, Kirk takes the Enterprise helm, where he meets Khan's ship in an intergalactical showdown. It was commissioned by John Claiborne. It was released in 1982, and it made $97 million at the box office on an $11 million budget. And if you don't like things crawling in your ears, this movie might not be the one for you.
What is it?
Stay to the end and listen to the trailer to find out what it is.
And I just want to apologize for John Clyburn for that mispronunciation by Big D. He does not know what he says.
What did I say?
He said Clayburn.
Yeah, maybe that's how he pronounces it.
John Clyburn. That concludes this week's episode of Shat The Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're everywhere, including Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram. We're also on Facebook. Just search for Shat The Movies. Our website is shatthemovies.com. Our email address where you can send in your recommendations for upcoming movie categories is hosts with an S at shatthemovies.com. You can support the podcast 3 different ways. Through a commission, we do take PayPal and Venmo requests. You can also shop via our Amazon affiliate link. Find all of our links via our support tab on the website, shatthemovies.com. You can also complete a survey there to help us find advertisers to sell you sweet, sweet goods. But that helps the podcast. You can also find our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review television series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, and what's the other one that Watchmen. We're about to do Watchmen. You can support the podcast by listening to any of those on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. And if you stop by any of those, leave a 5-star review. It helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-host, Big D, Dick Ebert, and Gene Phone Home Lyons, I'm Roger Roper. Be sure to join us next week for the following movie review. Thank you so much for listening. Take care. Good night and good luck.
Beyond the darkness, beyond the human evolution, is Khan, a genetically superior tyrant. Exiled to a barren planet, banished by a starship commander he is destined to destroy. Left for dead, he has survived.
I'll chase him round the moons of Nibia and round the Antares maelstrom and round perdition's flames before I give him up. There she is. There she is. Fire!
Shield's collapsing, Captain.
Can you defend your power? A few shots, sir.
Not enough against their shields.
The base is stubborn.
Scotty, I need warp speed in 3 minutes or we're all dead. I've done far worse than kill you. I've hurt you. And I wish to go on hurting you. I shall leave you as you left me. Marooned for all eternity. Buried alive. Buried alive. Sean! Sean!
At the end of the universe lies the beginning of vengeance. Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.